Well, we might not have footage, but we've got information. How the Bruins do in Spain, we'll tell you about it here on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show and this episode, potentially, your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. So like, comment, and subscribe. Becoming every day. We've got content coming out almost pretty regularly now with football, basketball, all the fun things happening with UC Athletics. In less than a year until they're in the Big Ten or the Big 16 or Big 18 or how many other teams are going to join the Big Ten. That's why you should stick with us here at Locked On UCLA. So to get started, what are we talking about? UCLA landed in Spain. They had to go through this, torrential, supposed tropical storm, hurricane. And we hope that all you guys are okay if you got affected by it. But the Bruins were able to leave on Sunday and touch down in Spain after going through lengthy travel accommodations. Again, they're without Aday Mara, without Aday Mara, and they're without Williams-Chill. And those are the three players who are not playing for UCLA. Although Mara has been seen in photos and he's been with the Bruins, he was going to meet up with them in the early stages of the 9-10 day trip. The Bruins are there also to play basketball, despite all the fun sightseeing opportunities where you can see them going to the Basilica, having cool food, fun little write-ups about Jan Vide, right? Who grew up in Slovenia and then eventually, actually at an early age, in his early teenage years, spent a little bit of time in Madrid and talked about all that when he was an early teenager in a UCLA.Bruins.com article. But what was important is that the Bruins took on the Madrid All-Stars, their first official action for UCLA since they lost against Gonzaga in the Sweet 16. The Bruins overall were able to get the win against the Madrid All-Stars, which is important because UCLA, we like to get wins. You don't want to see all these other D1 collegiate basketball teams go overseas, and also beat these teams. UCLA won 76-68. So what's important for UCLA is finding out ways how they're going to score the basketball, how they're going to defend, how they'll be rebounding without a lot of their size from their team. You're missing the starting five, potentially a starting 4/5, and another potential starting 4 in Williams-Chill. You've got a lot of guys who need to get rebounds for this team as the Bruins beat the Madrid All-Stars by 8. Let's compare this to other teams across the country who have already played the Madrid All-Stars. You've got Providence, who went over and beat Madrid 103-70. 103-70. Well, I haven't really words. Well, I didn't really dive in deep into that box score. And Illinois, they only beat Madrid 84-73. That was in early August, just about August 6th, I believe, was when that game was. Again, the Bruins are still without 3 significant players that Mick Cronin expects to get some time this year. You're going to get a Devin Williams, who's going to have to fight just for minimal minutes. Brandon Williams might play multiple positions. You're going to have walk-ons playing minutes. Mick Cronin was quoted as saying after the game, hey, we've got times when we were playing with 3 guards on the floor. We had 4 guards out there a lot, right? We're trying to play, everybody. For us, we're just playing these games like a practice. And he's already emphasized this before he left. And while he's there, wins and losses, especially with his whole roster either not available or not healthy, is important to note. We're just going to play because we're playing against somebody other than ourselves in practice. And when you play against the same player, sometimes it gets a little repetitive. And that's the key. You come over here and you make adjustments. It's a glorified scrimmage. But still, we like to see them win. And one of the big things Cronin was talking about in his media availability before leaving for this trip was how Sebastian Mack, a freshman, may be getting lost in the fray with all the other international recruits, kind of maybe someone who might be overlooked, especially by me, in terms of how much playing time he was going to get this year. He comes out, and Mick Cronin said we're going to need him to score the basketball. He leads the Bruins as a true freshman with 17 points, hitting on more than 50% of his shots, with maybe reports saying he can get in the lane, Mick Cronin's talked about his athleticism, ability to score from multiple parts of the court, 17 points for Sebastian Mack to lead the Bruins in scoring. And considering they didn't put up 80, it's good to see him put up nearly 20 in his unofficial first game as a Bruin. Lazar Stefanovic, who Mick Cronin heralded as a godsend to his team, a veteran while he is one of the 8 newcomers, is that guy. You can tell him do something once. He's played in the Pac-12, started in the Pac-12, averaged double figures in this conference, and is an easy move over for UCLA to start on the wing as the Bruins look for somebody to shoot the ball, have some good passing like they might have surrounding their team. 14 points for Stefanovic, 13 rebounds, a game-high 13 rebounds. So for a team I proclaim can get a lot of rebounds this year, but it's without their size on the Spain trip, who's going to get them? It was Stefanovic with the long limbs, the long reach, grabbing all the boards, making 6 of his 8 shots, and totaled 3 steals. And one of the things Stefanovic had to work on coming in was sometimes taking out-of-control shots, unnecessarily tough shots. While he can make the deep three and he can make a tough shot, he would play out of control. So it's nice to see the veteran now in his 3rd year of D1 college basketball making a good 6 of 8 shots, easy 3 of 4, 75% in terms of his shooting percentage. And that is a guy who you're looking for to really build upon as a leader in this early stages, right? A leader for this team when they're looking for it. The Bruins in this game, when they play the Madrid All-Stars, they're playing by FIBA rules. So the 2 scores, you've got Mack and Stefanovic, 17 points and a double-double, 14 and 13. The FIBA rules means they're playing 4 10-minute quarters. The teams were tied at 35 at halftime. And UCLA outscored Madrid in a dominant 3rd quarter, which would be the opening segment of the second half in men's college basketball here in America, where at some point they might go to 4 quarters, but until then, they're just playing 2 20-minute halves. So the 3rd quarter against Madrid, they outscored them 25-14, had a 13-point lead, according to the write-up by UCLA, with 8:07 left. The lead got cut to 6, just about half the 4th quarter remaining, and then Mack got fouled, makes a couple of free throws. The Bruins eventually found themselves going up by 10, up by 11 with about 2.5 minutes to go, and the Bruins are able to hold on, which Mick Cronin said, being out here and experiencing something like this is great. This is what Sebastian Mack said. Being out here and experiencing something like this is great. We compete a lot in practice, but you always want to see some different faces and show our toughness. I feel like we did a good job of that today. I feel like this year it's going to be fun. We've just got to keep working hard and focus on what coach is saying. There are 9 separate UCLA players who scored in this exhibition. They shot just under 39%, technically 38.5%, 27 of 70, a woeful 2 of 18 from downtown. And then they limited Madrid to even worse shooting, 37.5%, 21 of 56, in a game where the Bruins were able to get the dub by 8. Some other leading Bruins in this game included none other than the likes of Devin Williams, who scored 14 points, and then Dylan Andrews, who scored 12. So between those 4, if I can do some quick math, 57 of the 76 points coming from those players, all 3 of them wings, including Stefanovic, and then Williams getting some putbacks, getting a lot of playing time with all the other big men in front of him, other than Nuba, out and unavailable to play. So it's important to see the development from here. And while you might want to compare and contrast the other teams with what they did against Madrid, like in Illinois, like Providence just throttling them, UCLA is without some key talent in these upcoming games. Their next game is on the August 24th. I haven't seen any streaming notifications. I know people want to see the games, but remember, they're exhibitions. They're having a fun time. So while we wait for that, we will see what happens there. Other than that, what's UCLA going to do? Is there an Aday Mara situation that I was reading about from an outlet, Bruin Report Online, the other day? We'll talk about that coming up next on Locked On UCLA. This episode is brought to you by Betterhelp. If you're ever sitting there and you're wondering whether you're uncertain about what's going on in life, what the right path is, or how you are thinking about getting through it, maybe you're faced with a tough choice. Maybe you're in a tough situation in a relationship. Maybe everything's just hitting you at once. That certainly hit me earlier this year, right? The Bruins were in March Madness. Everything was just kind of cratering for me individually, and I just really wasn't certain about what to do. And still, am trying to grow. And I was arguably at what you could say my darkest point in life. But then I realized taking the next step involved going to therapy, and how repeatedly going to that, learning about whether it be past hurts and not even big trauma, but little trauma, and learning how that makes an impact, you can find ways to grow and align your values and find ways to practice and get better day in and day out. It's helpful to learn positive coping skills and how to set boundaries, and eventually you can get to become the best version of yourself. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedoncollege to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedoncollege. Second segment of the Locked On UCLA podcast. Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer with you guys. So the Bruins coming off a win in Spain. Coming up next for UCLA, they've got, let's take a look-see here. I believe they play either Girona or the likes of Valencia. I've heard that coming up next, they'll actually be playing Marc Gasol in one of these teams. He's on the roster for one of these teams. So the Bruins will play some good, quote-unquote, NBA-like competition when they play Girona on August 29th. But when they place the Valencia basket team on August 24th, that's their next game. Or the Bruins going to play a lot of guards. The ability to mix and match for Mick Cronin this year will be extremely fun when they can go big, have a small big, or play extremely small and quick and up tempo. The versatility will be important and entertaining this year. It's just they don't get to showcase the big man twin posts in the Spain trip. That's just how it is. Bona's recovering. He's available for practice. Aday Mara, he is in Spain, actually saw the team. And then you've got the likes of Berke Bouillon-Chinchil, who's enjoying a couple of weeks with family, and then will eventually join the Bruins back in a few weeks, I believe, and come back to UCLA and Westwood and finally see UCLA and what it's all about. But earlier in the week, I was reading what the Bruin Report Online put out about the different talks and even what Mick Cronin was trying to answer in that lengthy rant about conference realignment, the idea of what his team's going to look like, who's going to stand out when he was throwing out good names like Sebastian Mack. Cronin sat there and also talked about the Aday Mara situation. It didn't last more than 5 seconds. He said, you can go to compliance. I'm not going to comment on that. But clearly there is some frustration. So while there is still some confusion maybe about Mara and how the Zaragoza is handling the contract, and why there actually might still be a delay in Mara getting an eligibility from the NCAA, heading to UCLA and actually being eligible to play, that doesn't take away from the fact that he's available to go. He's in UCLA. He's in the school. But in terms of eligibility to play, that might be something that's in question a little bit. There's going to be a whole little situation about the contract. And while this hasn't necessarily happened before Zaragoza, for some reason with the Aday Mara, there is something there that the Bruins are going to have to handle. And I think Mara should be good to go to play by the beginning of the season. Remember, Adem Bona actually last year, his freshman year, he had to miss the first game due to some requirements or eligibility concerns, right? Missed that first game and then eventually was able to play for the rest of his Pac-12 Freshman of the Year award-winning season. Now you've got Mara, who might not necessarily be in the same situation, completely different, but there are some slight concerns. That's not going to take him away from UCLA. It's not going to take him out for the whole year. But just reading what Bro Report put out was, hey, there are some concerns. He's at UCLA. There's going to be a little more headache. Might delay his eligibility a little bit in the fall. That's what's important in the fall, the early part of the UCLA fall quarter. But it is interesting to see how the Bruins will build, right? As they're hoping to get some practice time, right? As much as they have talent, as much as they want to gel and go to Spain. This is why Cronin went here. He also lamented talking about the likes of, hey, what's going to happen when I want to go with all these new players, but I got Bona who's hurt. Berke and Mara aren't available to play and aren't necessarily technically enrolled in classes yet in this second summer quarter that most of the Bruins are in, so they can go on this trip. So although this will be a big building experience, there's still growth this team will have to endure in the early months of the season when they go and play in some big-time non-conference games, when they just play in simple games early in the front of the season, when they play the mid-majors. How are they going to divvy up the minutes and find ways to win consistently when they have a rotation that can shift in the blink of an eye, right? You can have different guys play. You can have different guys go in different spots. It's a team that can flip-flop on a dime and make an impact just immediately, unlike any other team Mick Cronin's ever had at UCLA. They're coming off Sweet 16, conference champs, 2 years away, soon to be 3 years off of a Final Four run. This is a team that can easily stand with that team if they gel and grow with all the newcomers and the freshmen here. So don't be worried too much. I would think about Mara from what I've read, what I've seen, other sources from, the Bro Report, all other UCLA outlets. All right, Mick Cronin says he's here, he's there. There just might be a little bit more of a headache at this moment that they're going to have to deal with until it's said and done. Barring something super crazy, Mara is good to go. Until then, he's just not available to play. He'll smile, wave at the teammates, maybe get a little closer with them, but we'll wait and see how that all plays out. Coming up next, some UCLA football news, right? Chip Kelly, some quotes about Grayson McCall. Who are UCLA facing in that first week coming up in the opening weekend of September? And Latu, some preseason accolades. We'll talk about that coming up next on Locked On UCLA. So we're going to tell you more coming up for Locked On UCLA about FanDuel, because FanDuel, the football season's about to kick off, and you want to be a part of the winning opportunities all season long. When you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. All you have to do is choose your Super Bowl winner. When they win, you get bonus bets. Use those bonus bets on the spreads, the props, overs, unders, even anything else. Go check it out on FanDuel by going to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. When you earn your bonus bets with America's #1 sports book, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Third and final segment today for Locked On UCLA. The Bruins win the opening part of their Spain trip. They get excited. We're ready to go. Haven't seen the highlights yet. I did see the write-up. Maybe there might be some goofy highlight tape mix at some point that we can look at and truly analyze. Until then, we got a little bit of a box score, got a write-up, and that's all we get. As we turn our page to the gridiron, UCLA football, they're in the midst of trying to decide a starting quarterback. It's a lot of talk between who could it be? Is it Moore? Is it Garbers? Could it even, dare I say, be Schlee, Martin, all those things down the line? But it's clearly a two-horse race at the moment from what I've read and what I've seen about it's Garbers, the veteran, who's been in the system for the longest, or the highly touted true freshman in Dante Moore who's been getting preseason All-America hype, even though he hasn't earned a starting job or some playing time in 2023. Speaking of hype, Chip Kelly went on the record and talked with reporters more about, hey, Grayson McCall is a 3-time Conference Player of the Year award winner, arguably one of the most accurate players in the history of the NCAA, I believe is what he was saying in football. Someone who's a great runner, has great stats, can pick apart a defense like none other. And while he was a little prone to getting banged up in the last season, had his name in the transfer portal. I even talked about, hey, what if the Bruins went after Grayson McCall to fill in for with DTR being gone? Who are they going to go? Well, they eventually got Schlee, who could have some similar NFL intangibles, running opportunity, and can throw the ball. So then they also had Dante Moore. So eventually Grayson McCall had many opportunities. I believe he might have been rumored one time to go to Auburn for a little bit. He had opportunities to go, and with his coach leaving, and eventually decided to stick. So you wonder how the offense with the new coach could change for Grayson McCall coming in. We'll get a little bit more technical as the week comes along, with week 1 just around the corner, right? At the end of August, beginning of September. But that's what the Bruins are going to face. Their defense is going to get an immediate test led by Latu, who is a preseason All-American, getting so much hype. There's been reports, there's been ESPN articles written about him. This is a big year for Latu. Obviously, there's the leadership. There's trying to be successful for a team. But for a personal standpoint, he's someone who going to the NFL would represent a big career change, obviously, right? Had to medically retire, had to fight back just to play, then bursts on the scene at UCLA in 2022. One more healthy campaign, and he could be a much higher NFL draft pick than any could have pictured, especially when he had to transfer from Washington and leave after being medically retired. It's a big personal year for him. And if the Bruins, if they can continue to get pressure on the quarterback, if D'Anton Lynn can breathe some new fun schemes into this defense and bring his NFL experience with what he has this year, they're still growing and trying to recruit for different spots, right? Filling the linebacking room, the secondary, right? They've been flipping some players around from the receivers like DJ Justice over to be a DB, some players going from safety to DB or back and forth. They're trying to find ways to make the combinations work for a defense that might be, you don't want to be bend but don't break, but a ferocious defense, one that can get pressure on the quarterback and force more turnovers, and more importantly, stop letting teams go all the way down the field and forcing them to not score when they get within the 20-yard line. Can they finally force some 3-and-outs consistently, force more punts than miss field goal attempts, or be lucky based on a bad bouncing ball on an interception because there's so much less wiggle room deeper in the red zone that the Bruins will have to stop and handle when it comes to winning time late in games. That's why the Grayson McCall matchup will be good. You could argue that game between the Bruins and the Chanticleers can be a 49-38. It could be a 42-32 game. It'll be one of those higher scoring games, I think, if the Bruins offense is clicking in all cylinders. It will be a much tougher game than the Bruins endured against Bowling Green. Against Bowling Green in week 1 of 2022, it was hot. It was early. Everybody was melting. There's nobody in the stadium. They just really kicked themselves in their own foot, and they were down in the blink of an eye by multiple scores and eventually won by 30-plus points. I don't think that happens this time. I think Coastal Carolina would easily find themselves in a good opportunity if the Bruins defense does not step up to the challenge early. Yet here UCLA is with an opportunity week 1 to establish some good defensive principles against a very dynamic dual-threat quarterback, and they can find a way to try and win against some tough teams early on, right? San Diego State, we'll see how that plays out week 2. NC Central, that speaks for itself. You start 3-0, you go knock off Utah if Rising's not healthy, and all of a sudden, you got a sneaky hype team, 4-0 and 1-0 in the Pac-12. That all is running way too far. We're just waiting to see who's the starting quarterback. Who's the ball going to go to consistently out of the backfield? Who's it going to go to in the receiving core? Who are the defenders? Who are the DBs that's going to make plays this year consistently? Can the linebacking core make room? Can the secondary not get beat over and over again? Those are all key things the Bruins will have to look out for here in 2023 if they want to be playing a New Year's Six Bowl in 2024, dare I say, challenge for a conference championship crown in what very well basically is the last real year of Pac-12 football with all these big-time teams leaving in 2024. It is what it is. But again, Grayson McCall will present a tough challenge for UCLA. Chip Kelly talked about it. Latu, a preseason All-American. We're still waiting on the official announcement of who's the starting quarterback, and we cannot wait until Chip Kelly does that. Might even be before the night of game 1, right? Who wants to really kind of put it in? You've got different options, right? You can put right before the game. You can talk about the day before the game, week 1 officially, which is next week, week 1 heading into the game, or will he do a dual quarterback system and just completely flip our minds back and forth, even though he said he probably won't do that? We'll see how it all eventually plays out for the Bruins. That's going to do it for Locked On UCLA. We'll cover more of the Spain trip if you're an everydayer, you want to stick around, talk about the everyday analysis of the Bruins in Spain as they prepare for Valencia Basket on August 24th. The Bruins prepare for week 1 in Coastal Carolina. Everything else, UCLA Athletics, stick here with Locked On UCLA. I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer telling you to get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Go Bruins.